உங்கள் பிள்ளைகள் 6 முதல் 12ஆம் வகுப்பு வரை சிபிஎஸ்இ ஸ்டேட் போர்டில் படிக்கிறார்களா? அவர்களை அதிக மதிப்பெண் வாங்க வைக்க ஈசி வழி சாணக்யா இன்டர்நேஷனல் அகாடமி கோச்சிங் சென்டர் ஃபார் ஆல் சப்ஜெக்ட்ஸ் 7823910123 ciacademy21@gmail.com.
A very good evening to all of you, and thank you all for coming. And I must say it's a great privilege to join you this evening. Let me make clear at first, I'm not the author of the book. I have contributed one chapter out of, I think, about 20 of them. Many of the other chapters are better than mine, so I will sort of limit my ownership but not my praise. I want to, in a sense, share with you why this book was written. What happened about a year ago. Some of us were talking, and the sense was that Prime Minister Modi actually was approaching a very interesting anniversary of being 20 continuous years in government, in a democratic polity, as a leader of her administration. Obviously, 8 of those years were as Prime Minister, and the rest of them were as Chief Minister. And if you look at democratic politics, because these, the nature of politics, there's a very high turnover rate, there aren't too many people who would have continuously been in politics, in electoral politics, which means you have to win an election every 4 years at the very least. So the sense was that it's an occasion to reflect on what he's done, and to do that really from a sort of a 360 perspective, by getting a very broad, very diverse set of people to pen their impressions about the Prime Minister. So those of you who would get the book will probably be a little surprised to see actually there are very few of us from the government in that list of authors. In fact, I think there are only 3 of us, the Home Minister, the National Security Advisor, and myself. Most of the other authors are people, there are sports people, there are business people, there are people from tech people, so it's a very broad selection. Now, rather than give you an address, since I've already written something, I thought let me at least read that out to you. What I'd like to do, I picked 4 passages. Only one of them is mine. One is of Sudha Murthy. Many of you would be familiar with her. She's an entrepreneur. She's someone very active in the literary world as well. One is a great sports star, PV Sindhu, who's really transformed the game of badminton in our country. And one is somebody from the world of acting, Anupam Kher. So I picked 4 passages. I would read them to you. In a way, they reinforce each other, but each one is a little bit different because the perspectives are different. So the first one is from my own, and I picked it for this reason, because it's the passage which refers to the Madison Square Garden, and really how that came about in a way. So let me start. That the evolution of our diaspora policy bears similar hallmarks of core beliefs and strong care. I had earlier written about, the various operations we have done to bring back people. It is now widely accepted that the Madison Square Garden event of 28 September 2014 was a watershed in that domain. Prime Minister Modi had been invited to come to the US by President Obama during a congratulatory phone call. My first call on him thereafter, as the ambassador in the US, naturally focused on a possible visit. The PM brought up the subject of the diaspora, which he described as a great strength of the nation. They needed to discover their own voice, and we needed to consolidate their role as a bridge. The instructions for the MSG event flowed from this belief. It must be organized in a manner that its sound would reverberate not just in the US and India, but across the world. That it certainly did, for most part because of the intensity of the PM's connect to the audience was so manifest. Thus began a unique experiment in popular diplomacy that has been the envy of many other leaders and countries. Equally, it has boosted the pride of the diaspora wherever he spoke. Now, the MSG, of course, was the first of its kind. It then moved to Australia. I had the honor of organizing one in London, in Wembley. And, to do it in the Wembley Stadium was, I cannot even describe the feeling to you. And in many ways, even today, the practice continues. We just, a few months ago, did one in Denmark. I must tell you, the Prime Minister of Denmark, she came on the stage along with the Prime Minister. And her first name is Mette. So first you had this entire, crowd there with that Modi, and then she came on and became Mette. And she said, couldn't have even imagined something like this. I mean, in her mind, it was like a rock concert, a political rally, it was everything rolled in one. And so when we actually did the Nordic summit, a large part of the summit was her describing to the other Nordic prime ministers what this particular experience was like. So let me switch to a very different paragraph. And this is a paragraph by P.V. Sindhu, who's our premier badminton player. And I read from this chapter, which he writes, saying, as I began writing this chapter, the question that struck me was this. Why is that so? Why is that so? The preceding paragraph, she raises the question that Prime Minister Modi is among the very few undisputed youth icons of India. So she's asking the question, why is he a youth icon? After all, if we go by the conventional wisdom about who can be a youth icon, then Prime Minister Modi defies the entirety of that wisdom. He is not young. He does not come from the domain of sports or cinema or popular culture or other such fields conventionally associated with youth attraction. In fact, politics, the lifelong activity that Modi has chosen as his service, is rarely associated with youth icons, at least in more recent history. And yet, he has now for almost 2 decades enthused the youth in our country, first in Gujarat and then the entirety of India, and he continues to do so. So I mulled over this question for many days, but the answer eluded me. While I thought and researched, one of Modi's quotes continued to reverberate in my mind. Speaking from the ramparts of the Red Fort on Independence Day in 2017, the Prime Minister had said, we have to leave this chalta hai attitude. We have to think of badal sakta hai. This attitude will help us as a nation. Eventually, I changed the way I was approaching the question, and then the answer seemed so natural. What is that one defining character that we most associate youth with? Age, certainly, but that is biological and not necessarily a characteristic or attitudinal quality. If I were to identify the one quality, the one attitude that most defines youth, it would be fire in the belly and the audacity to change the situation rather than compromise with it. How will this not happen? होगा कैसे नहीं. That is the preeminent characteristic of a young person. It makes them push the boundaries, dream the impossible, make it happen, and that is Modi. So, now let's see what Mr. Anupam Kher has to say. And his chapter is actually titled Modi, the man India trusts in a crisis. So, these are his words now. Unlike many predecessors who became passive during a crisis, Modi always steps up, takes charge, and fulfills his duty. This is critical as active leadership is vital for countries to emerge from a crisis situation. In a country where people are used to politicians going below the radar when something goes wrong, Modi is an exception. He has never shied away from taking the responsibility of leading Gujarat and India out of a critical situation. An excellent example of this was Modi's conduct at ISRO in September 2019 when Chandrayaan's 2 Vikram lander lost communication. Realizing that the hard-working ISRO team was extremely demoralized, Modi decided to stay back in Bengaluru and return to the ISRO center the next day. He spoke to the project team and encouraged them to forget the failure and take pride in their achievements. Embracing an emotional ISRO chief, K. Shivan, to console him remains one of the most iconic moments from Modi's 20 years of governance. Modi's gesture and raw emotions visible in that image reflected his leadership. He was fulfilling his promise by being present, both in good times and in bad times. This sense of responsibility automatically creates a belief in the minds of citizens across the country. Come what may, Modi will be there for us. And when I was flagging this paragraph for my own reference, I was actually reminded of an experience I had when I was Foreign Secretary. It was quite common for me to return from some trip fairly late at night and then sit clearing your stuff so that your desk is clean the next day. And I still remember one day, it was around past midnight, and our consulate in Mazar-e-Sharif in Afghanistan was under attack. And we were using the phones, trying to figure out what happened. So this was Afghanistan of that era. So you had to kind of get a friendly warlord who would go in and help your people. So all of this was happening. You're juggling 4 phones, talking to everybody, keeping the courage up at that end. And the phone rang. My phone rang. And normally, when the Prime Minister calls, you get a no caller ID. Okay. So it sort of took me a bit by surprise. And but even on the no caller ID, usually somebody connects you. Okay. So this time it was the Prime Minister. Okay. And obviously he assumed I would recognize him rightly. And so his first question was, "Jage ho?" I said, "Ha, sir." It's 12:30. What else could I be doing other than being awake? Because in his life, that is probably natural. He said, "Acha, TV dekh rahe ho?" I said, "Ha, sir, TV dekh rahe hain." "To kya ho raha hai wahan?" So, because he assumed that's exactly what I'd be doing. I said, "Nahi, sir, wo abhi attack chal raha hai, but the help is on its way, etc." So, exchange. So then he said, "अच्छा जब ख़त्म हो जाएगा मुझे फ़ोन कर लेना." So I said, "सर इसमें 2-3 घंटे और लगेंगे, तो जब हो जाएगा मैं आपके यहाँ बता दूँगा." So there was a pause. He said, "मुझे फ़ोन कर देना." Okay. And I say this to you because that sense today, that sense for people who work in the government, people who are in public life, who are in political life, and I would say today people in the country. I mean, the way he put it, good times or bad times, he's there. And politicians are always there in good times. Okay. So that's in many ways really the difference. The fact that when things are difficult, and we saw that during COVID, we saw that during COVID. There were many, if you look around the world, how leaders handled COVID. Not everybody stepped up, not everybody said, I will take that difficult call, it is my call. And to handle the consequences of very big decisions, which at that time you took, with the enormous risk of what was being decided. That is really an extremely, I would say, singular quality, and which then brings me to my fourth and last paragraph, which I read to you, which is Sudha Murthy. And again, why I picked this four is the four of us. We are I know each one of the people I'm reading. We are four very different people from four very different domains. And in that sense, each one of us is giving you a perspective, as I said, in many ways a reinforcing perspective, but a different one as well. So here's what Sudha Murthy has to say. Gone are the days when people sent their children abroad with tears in their eyes, knowing that the children will settle there and not return to India due to financial constraints. Today, many people choose to return with a positive change in the environment back home. Some even come back with the greatest of intentions to keep the progress growing. Now, Indians are no longer considered secondary to anyone at a global level. The younger generation is confident and ready to face all countries in various competitions, including cricket, but also in athletics and so much more. We aim for the best. This is possible only when there is a true leader like Modi, who is as deeply rooted as a banyan tree, a big tree with a big personality. Every part of the tree is useful to others, much like our Prime Minister. Every project is useful to us. The animals can eat the leaves, the birds can make the nests, people can take fruits, bees, and humans can both enjoy the honey and the aroma of flowers, and the branches can be cut for wood to create a shelter for the needy. But there a good leader stands, tall and all alone, without any benefit for himself or herself. These are the leaders entrenched in ground reality with the aim to transform the destiny of the country and the people. So I cannot find a better way of ending this book. I think this came straight from her heart. I think it touches many of us. Once again, as I said, I really thank you all for the opportunity today to share parts of a book which means a lot to many of us. And I'd be very happy to sit down and converse about the book and anything else with all of you. Thank you.